Okay, we're going to continue on a theme here. Notes on the Abolition of Death, Part 2. From 1 Corinthians 15:26. Now, this is actually in the Bible, and you will not hear any discussion on the abolition of death from any preacher, famous preacher or non-famous preacher who was part of the Christian church. No, you won't hear anything about it this Sunday. The abolition of death. All right, from 1 Corinthians 15:26. The last enemy is being abolished, death. That's the verse from the Concordant Literal New Testament. The last enemy is being abolished, death. The free will chick has asked me in the past to name just one scripture, which proves which proves the salvation of all. If I give her one, she's quick to say, "Oh, that doesn't mean what it says." Then she gives me all kinds of free will theology as to why my verse is wrong and her verses are right as rain. She calls me a universalist, so I call her a limitarian. Lately, I've been thinking about the power of abolishing of death. I can't quite use this verse, 1 Corinthians 15:26, to prove the salvation of all, because the verse goes way beyond the salvation of all, way beyond. Let's see where these thoughts go. Number one, the death is the wages of sin, according to the King James Version. Death is the wages of sin. Number two, the Concordant Version says death is the ration of sin, which would make more sense as you earn your wages, but a ration is given out whether or not you've earned it, and some folks, like little babies, they get death even though they don't earn death. Thus, it's a ration of sin. And if the wages of sin, number three, if the wages of sin is abolished, it's a powerful thought. It more or less proves that something big is going on here, even if we don't understand it. It's something big. That the wages of sin is temporary to be abolished one day. What comes next? Number four, what comes next indeed? If death is to be abolished, what about threats? Number five, I think it can be argued that the threat of death is the prime motivator for most of our lives. The threat of death equals slavery. The threat of death makes us go to work each day. The threat of death forces us to stick with the Klan for fear of rejection and the death that may result from the rejection of the Klan. Number six, the fear and threat of death that makes us cling to mommy or daddy. Number seven, the fear and threat of death is really the motivator behind such sins as gossip, and backbiting. When you think about it, that's kind of insightful there. That if you weren't dying, you wouldn't even bother to gossip. If you were immortal, you wouldn't bother to gossip. So number seven, the fear and threat of death is really the motivator behind such sins as gossip and backbiting. Number eight, but if God can abolish death and make all alive beyond the grasp of death, because death no longer exists, doesn't this mean that doesn't this meet even the minimal definition of salvation? Number nine, and get this, if God abolishes death, it has to include all. Why? Because it's the nature of language. The dead are dead. Number 10, the dead are not alive. Christian mythology has some concoction about the dead are still alive and either go to heaven or hell, but no, the dead are dead. 11, Christian mythology has some babble about the dead, that death will be no more from the book of Revelation. In other words, it will not advance beyond this point. But they don't dare embrace 1 Corinthians 15:26, the total abolition of death. 12. The only way to abolish death is to make the dead alive, all of them. The only way to abolish death is to make the dead alive. 13. If some are dead while others are alive, then death has not been abolished. 14. If death is finally abolished, then threats of death are abolished as well, and our behavior radically changes. No more gossip, no more begging for food or stealing anything. If death is abolished, no one needs to rule over us, nor can they. Rule and the threat of death go hand in hand. 16. Thus, when death goes, there goes the rule of all, including Christ's rule and reign. See 1 Corinthians 15:20-28. 17. Does the abolition of death prove the salvation of all? I say yes and more. 18. The abolition of death takes us into the realm of unexplored thought. The abolition of death takes us into the realm of unexplored thought. What is life when only life exists? Oh my goodness. That is a big thought. 19. Right now our little minds know that if death is mostly about the avoidance of death, Right now our little minds know that if life is mostly about the avoidance of death, we're running from death all the time. But what is life when death is abolished? Oh my. 21. Could it be that 2 verses later, when the 3 biggest words in the Bible show up, that is life? 22. Could it be that life really begins when God is all in all? 1 Corinthians 15:28. The 3 biggest words. All in all. God all in all. Okay. This is a big thing here. The threat of death goes hand in hand with rulership, and Paul promises that Christ's rulership will come to an end. Why, it makes perfect sense. His rulership can finally come to an end when death is abolished. Before that, you're going to need rulership, and rulership goes along with the threat of death. Anyway, leave a comment, pass this along, share it somewhere, because this is a big thought, and you can handle big thoughts.